Hello there. Hello, Mary and Evelyn and Sissy Lala and Ali. You were the first ones up today. I'm so glad you're all here. Welcome to another Fireside Reading of Siddhartha. We'll be reading this for, I think, probably we'll finish it near the end of next week, maybe the following week. But we will continue. I've had some suggestions for books afterwards. One small book that I'm thinking about, really more a kid's book, but it would only be a couple of days of reading, and I think that might be fun. But that will be revealed a little later. Meanwhile, let's continue. Welcome to a fireside reading of Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Chapter 8, Part 2. With a smiling face, Siddhartha watched Govinda leave. He loved him still, this faithful man, this fearful man. And how could he not have loved everybody and everything in this moment, in the glorious hour after his wonderful sleep filled with Om? The enchantment which had happened inside of him in his sleep and by means of the Om was this very thing, that he loved everything, that he was full of joyful love for everything he saw. And it was this very thing, so it seemed to him now, which had been his sickness before, that he was not able to love anybody or anything. With a smiling face, Siddhartha watched the leaving monk. The sleep had strengthened him much, but hunger gave him much pain, for by now he had not eaten for 2 days, and the times were long past when he had been tough against hunger. With sadness, and yet also with a smile, he thought of that time. In those days, so he remembered, he had boasted of 3 things to Kamala, had been able to do 3 noble and undefeatable feats: fasting, waiting, and thinking. These had been his possessions, his power and strength, his solid staff. In the busy, laborious years of his youth, he had learned these 3 feats, nothing else. And now they had abandoned him. None of them was his any more, neither fasting, nor waiting, nor thinking. For the most wretched things he had given them up, for what fades most quickly, for sensual lust, for the good life, for riches. His life had indeed been strange, and now, so it seemed, now he had really become a childlike person. Siddhartha thought about his situation. Thinking was hard on him. He did not really feel like it, but he forced himself. Now, he thought, since all these most easily perishing things have slipped from me again, now I'm standing here under the sun again, just as I have been standing here a little child. Nothing is mine. I have no abilities. There is nothing I could bring about. I have learned nothing. How wondrous is this! Now that I'm no longer young, that my hair is already half grey, that my strength is fading, now I'm starting again at the beginning, and as a child. Again he had to smile. Yes, his fate had been strange. Things were going downhill with him, and now he was again facing the world void and naked and stupid. But he could not feel sad about this. No, he even felt a great urge to laugh about himself, to laugh about this strange, foolish world. Things are going downhill with you, he said to himself, and laughed about it. And as he was saying it, he happened to glance at the river, and he also saw the river going downhill, always moving on downhill and singing and being happy through it all. He liked this well. Kindly he smiled at the river. Was this not the river in which he had intended to drown himself in past times, 100 years ago? Or had he dreamed this? Wondrous indeed was my life, so he thought. Wondrous detours it has taken. As a boy, I had only to do with gods and offerings. As a youth, I had only to do with asceticism, with thinking and meditation, was searching for Brahman, worshipped the eternal in the Atman. But as a young man, I followed the penitents, lived in the forest, suffered of heat and frost, learned to hunger, taught my body to become dead. Wonderfully, soon afterwards, insight came towards me in the form of the great Buddha's teachings. I felt the knowledge of the oneness of the world circling in me like my own blood. But I also had to leave Buddha and the great knowledge. I went and learned the art of love with Kamala, learned trading with Kamaswami, piled up money, wasted money, learned to love my stomach, learned to please my senses. I had to spend many years losing my spirit to unlearn thinking again, to forget the oneness. Isn't it just as if I had turned slowly and on a long detour from a man into a child, from a thinker into a childlike person? And yet this path has been very good, and yet the bird in my chest has not died. But what a path has this been! I had to pass through so much stupidity, through so much vice, through so many errors, through so much disgust and disappointments and woe, just to become a child again and to be able to start over. But it was right, so my heart says yes to it. My eyes smile to it. I've had to experience despair. I've had to sink down to the most foolish one of all thoughts, to the thought of suicide, in order to be able to experience divine grace, to hear Om again, to be able to sleep properly and awake properly again. I had to become a fool to find Atman in me again. I had to sin to be able to live again. Where else might my path lead me to? It is foolish, this path. It moves in loops. Perhaps it is going around in a circle. Let it go as it likes. I want to take it. Wonderfully, he felt joy rolling like waves in his chest. Wherever from, he asked his heart, where from did you get this happiness? Might it come from that long good sleep which has done me so good? Or from the word Om, which I said? Or from the fact that I have escaped, that I have completely fled, that I am finally free again and am standing like a child under the sky? Oh, how good is it to have fled, to have become free. How clean and beautiful is the air here, how good to breathe. There, where I ran away from, there everything smelled of ointments, of spices, of wine, of excess, of sloth. How I hated this world of the rich, of those who revel in fine food, of the gamblers. How I hated myself for staying in this terrible world for so long. How I hated myself, have deprived, poisoned, tortured myself, have made myself old and evil. No, never again I will, as I used to like doing so much, delude myself into thinking that Siddhartha was wise. But this one thing I have done well, this I like, this I must praise, that there is now an end to that hatred against myself, to that foolish and dreary life. I praise you, Siddhartha. After so many years of foolishness, you have once again had an idea. have done something, have heard the bird in your chest singing, and have followed it. Thus he praised himself, found joy in himself, listened curiously to his stomach, which was rumbling with hunger. He had now, so he felt in these recent times and days, completely tasted and spit out, devoured up to the point of desperation and death, a piece of suffering, a piece of misery. Like this, it was good. For much longer, he could have stayed with Kamaswami, made money, wasted money, filled his stomach, and let his soul die of thirst. For much longer he could have lived in this soft, well-upholstered hell, if this had not happened. The moment of complete hopelessness and despair, that most extreme moment, when he hung over the rushing waters and was ready to destroy himself. That he had felt this despair, this deep disgust, and that he had not succumbed to it, that the bird, the joyful source and voice in him, was still alive after all, this was why he felt joy. This was why he laughed. This was why his face was smiling brightly under his hair, which had turned grey. It is good, he thought, to get a taste of everything for oneself, which one needs to know. That lust for the world and riches do not belong to the good things. I have already learned as a child. I have known it for a long time, but I have experienced only now. And now I know it. Don't just know it in my memory, but in my eyes, in my heart, in my stomach. Good for me to know this. For a long time he pondered his transformation, listened to the bird as it sang for joy. Had not this bird died in him? Had he not felt its death? No, something else from within him had died, something which already for a long time had yearned to die. Was it not this, what he used to intend to kill in his ardent years as a penitent? Was this not his self, his small, frightened and proud self he had wrestled with for so many years, which had defeated him again and again, which was back again after every killing, prohibited joy, felt fear? Was it not this which today had finally come to its death, here in the forest, by this lovely river? Was it not due to this death that he was now like a child, so full of trust, so without fear, so full of joy? Now Siddhartha also got some idea of why he had fought this self in vain as a Brahmin, as a penitent. Too much knowledge he had held him back, too many holy verses, too many sacrificial rules, too much self-castigation, so much doing and striving for that goal. Full of arrogance he had been, always the smartest, always working the most, always one step ahead of all others, always the knowing and spiritual one, always the priest or wise one. Into being a priest, into this arrogance, into this spirituality, his self had retreated. There it sat firmly and grew, while he thought he would kill it by fasting and penitence. Now he saw it, and saw that the secret voice had been right, that no teacher would ever have been able to bring about his salvation. Therefore he had to go out into the world, lose himself to lust and power, to woman and money, had to become a merchant, a dice gambler, a drinker and a greedy person, until the priest and samana in him was dead. Therefore he had to continue bearing these ugly years, bearing the disgust, the teachings, the pointlessness of a dreary and wasted life up to the end, up to bitter despair, until Siddhartha the lustful, Siddhartha the greedy, could also die. He had died. A new Siddhartha had woken up from the sleep. He would also grow old. He would also eventually have to die. Mortal was Siddhartha. Mortal was every physical form. But today he was young. He was a child, the new Siddhartha, and was full of joy. He thought these thoughts, listened with a smile to his stomach, listened gratefully to a buzzing bee. Cheerfully he looked into the rushing river. Never before he had liked a water so well as this one. Never before he had perceived the voice and the parable of the moving water thus strongly and beautifully. It seemed to him as if the river had something special to tell him, something he did not know yet, which was still awaiting him. In this river, Siddhartha had intended to drown himself. In it, the old, tired, desperate Siddhartha had drowned today. But the new Siddhartha felt a deep love for this rushing water, and decided for himself not to leave it very soon. Thank you all for joining me. We will continue tomorrow, same time and place, 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram for the next chapter of Siddhartha. Until then, everyone, do stay very, very well indeed.